Welcome, world. I've got a real nice, what I think, funny story to tell you. This happened during World War II, and I was aboard one of the most famous ships, I think, in America and probably the whole world. And we were sailing along when all of a sudden we heard, "All hands on deck." So everybody ran up on the deck, and we're looking up, and the captain walks out of his little cubbyhole up there, and he starts to talk to us. And he says, "I want to tell you, gentlemen and ladies, that this is the most marvelous ship in the whole world. It is the biggest battleship we've ever held and had made. It has more guns, more artillery. We could shoot down planes. We could shoot down at submarines. We can bomb other ships that are approaching us that don't even know we're in the ocean. This is a ship that no other has ever been able to compare with it. And you should be proud to be able to work aboard this ship. It is such a wonder." And ladies and gentlemen, all your life, you'll remember the greatness, the magnitude, the magnificence of this one ship. And as he kept talking, constantly reminding us of how magnificent and wonderful it is to be able to serve aboard this ship, one of the voices, one of the sailors, there's always somebody like that, after listening to all this glorious praise, said, "Then why don't we sell it?" And we all broke out into laughter. And the reason I tell that story is it not only was fun for me at that time, and I was serving on the USS Iowa. Now, I wasn't assigned to the ship. I was just being transported to the next island, that which I will be working on a mission to see if we could regain that island back from the Japanese and return it to American control. So the USS Iowa is a battleship that was gigantic, and it was something that I think every sailor who ever had the privilege of being aboard must always remember for the rest of their lives. Unfortunately, almost every one of those sailors have probably passed away. I think I've told you before that I served in World War II. I tried to get in when I was 16, finally got in when I was 17, and now that I'm 93, everybody that I served with has passed away. Most of my friends who served in World War II have passed away, with the exception of one gentleman who was a few months older than I, moved out of Houston, now living in Austin. Unfortunately, not quite as healthy as I have been fortunate enough to be. But it was a privilege, an honor, not only our duty, but to work to save the lives, save the soul of the United States of America. Well, I told you that story with a purpose. We're now also in another war, an evil war, just like it was against the Nazis and the Japanese. Our evil war is with a bug. You can't even see it. You have to try to protect yourself. And too many of us fall evil to that bug. I'm going to make one quick admission to you before I go on. I have not seen my wife, who we've been married for over 72 years, that's a long time, knew one another for 6 years prior to that, Then I went off to the Navy, came back, and we got married in 1948, also a long way off, 72 years ago. My wife, who I haven't seen for over 3 months, has been confined in a nursing home. And if you've been reading or watching the news, the nursing homes throughout the United States have been the target of that evil bug. So every day, though I can't see her, I can't call, but even more often than that, I pray that maybe she too will return safe and sound. Maybe a lot beaten up by being confined to a little room, not allowed to get out except to go to her restroom, which is part of, well, I will say a room of prison. It's very small, and the nurses don't come in any longer without wearing masks and robes and being very, very careful. The same thing is true with her physician. And they try to take care of her to the best of their capabilities. And I can only thank they and everyone in the staff, because it wasn't too long ago that we did learn that one of the staff, a waiter, came down with the bug. Can you imagine a waiter who was handing out food from plate to plate? What? It could have spread that pandemic internally. And maybe that's what's happened in many of the other nursing homes that have been fighting the fatalities of so many of their residents and staff members. Well, I'm going to go back 5 years now. It was April 20th, 2020. And I wrote a note to His Holiness, Pope Francis. And if you don't mind, please indulge me while I read what I wrote to the Pope. I addressed him properly, His Holiness, Pope Francis. On September 24th, 2015, you addressed an audience of Americans with these compassionate words: politics is instead an expression of our compelling need to live as one in order to build as one for the greatest common good. And as you went on with many of your other talks, I was writing notes and saying, this man is unbelievable. I had only heard of the Pope. I had never really listened to him. Well, sure, there were prayer sermons, but I never listened to him giving a speech. And that was the speech as soon as he arrived in the United States. President Obama and Michelle greeted him, and they came up to the podium, and those were the first words that the Pope spoke to America, that we are an expression of compelling to live as one in order to build as one for the common good of all. Well, I don't know about you and the other millions of Americans like me and other people throughout the world that was listening and watching the Pope. And I found him to be a true messenger of God. Not a phony, not a fake, but a man who has given his lifetime to not only know what God wants us to hear, but to express his wishes to us, each of us, every one of us, to understand we are all God's children. We are all one. So I sat down and I wrote this letter on September 24th, 2015, just a little bit before Christmas. And I said, you addressed an audience of American with these compassionate words. And I just spoke them to you. And I said, I, along with millions of others, watched and listened to your homily and let those meaningful words sink into my heart. It motivated me to want to thank you as the people's Pope. I wrote a rather lengthy letter of my appreciation, but I stopped and admonished myself for not presenting you with a Christmas gift, a gift of significance, a gift of meaning. So I sat right down and painted a portrait of you from my viewpoint. I abandoned the plain white skull cap and white gown. In this portrait, I pose you delivering a benediction with both arms raised, with a smile on your face. I understand you don't, or any other priest or rabbi or minister delivers benedictions with a smile. It's one of the most important prayers of all. They're usually quite solemn. But you, sir, your smile captivated me and millions of people who are watching you. Well, when it came to painting the background, I found myself very guilty of painting heavenly clouds and angels. Whoops, a total amateur competing against Raphael and Michelangelo and the other great masters of the world. Am I kidding? So I decided to do something unique, taking advantage of technology, which probably those great masters never even heard the word. So using a calligraphy of your background from the early days of when you were a priest in Argentina and climbing up your ladder of success until you were meeting with President Barack Obama in the White House. And when you look very closely at the painting, where your arms are raised in the benediction, you are, in that photograph, between your thumb of your right hand and this finger. Right in that center, you are visiting with the President of the United States. Well, I had the painting framed and shipped to the Vatican while praying you would be pleased. Made copies to give to a few of my very select friends, yet I was not wanting to sell to others because I looked at the painting as my Christmas gift to you, period. But I want to show the audience what I had sent to the Pope, and I hope you can see this. I'm not sure that is visible with the shadow and the sunlight blocking the screen. If you can't see it, I apologize, but it, not only in my words, it is a beautiful painting. And it was signed the Pope of Hope, which I trademarked, and I made that whole painting copyrighted, shipped it off, had to have it crated, and that was a great expense, and I sent it off to the Vatican, making a prayer, hoping that it will arrive safely and be seen, and that the Pope would say, I love it, and let's place it somewhere that others could see it. Well, I didn't sell any paintings. I didn't want to. It was my Christmas gift to the Pope. Well, What has changed my thinking since then? A bug that destroys human beings, their lives, or kills them. The worldwide pandemic has created a worldwide panic, a lockdown of normalcy, where even the well-to-do feel the pinch, while the poor are suffering. And I must say, my being locked down without seeing my wife, only seeing walls, not hearing her singing along with me or our holding hands or just talking over the breakfast table. It's like being locked in a prison, all by yourself. Many of you may be relating to it. I didn't go out for walks by myself. I stayed in this apartment, up on the 19th floor from which I'm speaking to you right now. Well, I soon learned that funds were being raised by people, organizations, other nonprofits to pay the nurses and the doctors and other caregivers who so bravely, passionately, and compassionately served those people that had been bitten by the bug and were confined to their hospital beds. Then I remembered the very mission that you stated. You stated, love is our mission. And I started to think, love, how can we, ordinary people, from the poor to the middle class to the wealthiest of all, how can we help the people who actually came down with that Corona-19 virus, suffering weeks in the hospital on ventilators and injections and everything else, and finally, fortunately, able to come home. Well, there are two groups. One are the sick or the recovered, plus two, those who unfortunately passed away. The total numbers are astronomical, and as of this day, they are still climbing. Well, I wanted to do something in which everyone, you, and you, can participate, as well as benefit. Now, in my heart, I believe there is a huge, sympathetic, and concerned market out of those who are willing to purchase by participating and buying the Pope of Hope, which is trademarked, copyrighted, my painting, which is now in the Vatican. I believe in my heart that you will be willing to purchase a copy of the Pope of Hope. Yes, the huge, and I mean huge, 80 million Americans of the Catholic faith can be the market foundation. 80 million Catholics just in the United States. If I divide it by an average of 4 households, it's still 20 million households. And my painting comes in 3 sizes. The large one could go in your master room, whether it's your living room, or it could be in any one of the rooms. I have 3 sizes. The middle size can go in a smaller room, your dining room, and particularly in each of your children's rooms to remind them of the Pope and what is his mission is in life. I could also visualize this ad with, or doing ads in the newspaper, on magazines, on social media, on video, with the painting, and just saying, I can visualize you as an admirer to read. You don't need to be Catholic to respect and admire this awesome man of God. I am not of that faith, but I do have that painting hanging in my home. And sometimes I'm sitting in a chair just staring at that painting, and my mind wanders off, and it gives me not only ideas, but it makes me calm, confident that I could do whatever I want to do. The Pope said, our mission is love. And if we want to pay our respects to those survivors of the pandemic and to the families who lost a loved one from a bite of an unseen, unknown bug. Yeah, we've given it names, Kodana 19, doesn't matter. It was still an invisible bug that we wear face masks and gloves, and if you're working with those patients, you wear robes. We try to protect ourselves. But I don't think anybody has ever seen the bug unless it's under a microscope. And we don't walk around with microscopes. So we need to protect ourselves. Wear our gloves. Wear our masks. And try not to abuse yourself by touching things that you can't sanitize. Ladies and gentlemen, fighting in World War II, we had armament, and we had guns to fight back, and we had battleships and tanks and airplanes, you name it, and submarines. But we don't have anything personal to kill that bug, unless it might be a spray that you might use, or making sure that the handles and doorknobs and railings are clean, wiped free of the bug. That's why we ask you to wear gloves. Keep that face mask on. And don't kid yourself. The only time I take my face mask off is when I'm in the car all alone. I pull it down to my chin so I could breathe and look around to both sides to make sure no cars are coming either way. But ladies and gentlemen, it's better to be safe than to be sorry. And what I'm talking about is the millions around the world that will be sorry for the rest of their lives, and the other millions that can't be sorry because they have no heart, no soul, no life. So since I only heard that people are kind enough, generous enough to try to pay back to the doctors, the nurses, the other caretakers in the hospitals and wherever, I really felt there is a need to show those people who either survived, who lost a loved one, and are grieving not only now, but probably for the rest of their lives, that a loved one of theirs was bitten by an unseen, indivisible bug and can never come back to share a lifetime of growing, living, and loving together. Well, in the United States alone, with 3,300,000 population, there are probably 75 million households. If 1 out of every 4 participate, and the average income from the sale of each painting is only $10, I price them low, purposefully, so that the poor, the middle class, and the wealthy could buy those paintings. The small painting, $49.95, less than $50. The middle painting, which is not very middle, $99.95. And the large painting, $149.95. And if you don't have that money, if you don't have that $50, I'll accept 3 equal payments. And when you receive the first painting, and if you don't think it lives up to your imagination, who is this guy thinking that I want to spend $50 for a painting? Send it back. I'll refund your money, every penny of it, other than the shipping and handling. I'm not in it to make money. I want you to understand it. I take all of the profit, and I give it the pandemic people, to the pandemic people who are the survivors, the pandemic people survivors. P.S. To have that money, I don't know how much it's going to be. That will depend upon you. That will depend upon your reaction to buy 1 painting, 2 paintings, whatever you want. But even the small painting at $49.95, $50, you buy a bottle of aspirin or whatever and pay $69, $79 and more, and eat those pills up and gone forever. Every one of those paintings, I can guarantee you, will be a heritage painting passed on from your family to your children and their children and grandchildren. It is a heritage painting, something that you will be proud to own, proud for visitors, your guests, your family to come in and say, "Where did you ever get that painting?" And you say, "That painting is in the Vatican. It's a painting of the Pope." A painting in the Vatican from a contemporary American artist? There probably isn't another one like it. And while I'm talking about pricing, I'm thinking of doing a special edition. When the Pope received my painting, much to my surprise, he sent me the most beautiful, gracious letter thanking me for my gift. It was remarkable. And he also made an apostolic prayer over me. It doesn't matter, I'm not of his faith. What does matter is that the Pope, one of the most busiest men in the world, took the time to write to a guy he probably will never meet, will never shake hands, will never give a hug to one another. And yet my respect to him is beyond, well, it's beyond my saying. And I hope, as a result of receiving his letter, which I have hanging on my wall, it happens to be hanging right next to my letter from President Obama thanking me for my service during World War II. But those are 2 most cherished things. And the most interesting thing, the Pope included a small black and white photograph of his face that he signed in black ink, Francisco. And only this week, while I was looking at the painting, said to myself, Earl, you're going to do a special edition. What does that mean? Well, I bought a special edition a couple of years ago, and I paid $2,500 for it. And it was a painting of a Campbell's soup can on a shopping bag. And it isn't something that you might relate to if you watch, unless you want to keep eating Campbell's soup every single day. It's not like my painting. But when the artist passed away, the $2,500 that I paid for that jumped in the catalogs to $40,000. So while I was staring at the painting that I want to show you once again, because I have updated it for a special purpose, and I hope you'll be able to see it. It's so important. Can you see this? Especially those magic words, the magic words that I just included. It says the Pope of Hope, and the magic words are, we pray to love, hope, and peace. We pray for love, hope, and peace. To give you the reason that you need to have that in your house, to remind you that every day we should be thanking God in our prayers and thanking God that we are repeating His words, that we are to love, hope, and pray for peace. Magic words, if we could accomplish it. Well, if I were to run an ad, and as I mentioned, I can visualize an ad with a headline that says, you don't need to be Catholic to respect and admire this awesome man of God. The body copy would explain, we are all God's children. Whatever faith you follow, our mission is to love each other by participating. The money will be used to assist the pandemic survivors and the grieving parents or spouse of those loved ones who died from a mysterious bug, not from something that you might expect, a heart disease, cancer, maybe diabetes, any one of the illnesses, but from an invisible bug that takes out people no matter how young, or especially if you're over 65, you are a target. And at that target of the millions, we also have children, which we thought might be immune. That bug is evil. He doesn't ask your name. He doesn't ask where you came from. Doesn't ask which faith you follow, or whether you're married or not. He's there, just like the enemy in World War II, to kill you or capture you. We are at war, ladies and gentlemen, and all I'm asking is to help pay back, not only to the frontline people like the doctors and the nurses, who we all love, but we need to pay back to those parents. I know, while I was away, my mother, my father, probably my kid brother, and certainly close friends from my family were praying. I hope Earl comes back safe and sound. Today we don't pray that Jess or Jack or Jane or Jill comes back safe and sound. We all expect us to be safe and sound. Until suddenly, out of nowhere, that invisible bug takes one little bite and off you go to a land where you may never be able to return from. So I believe with a population of 3,300,000 with 75 million households, if 1 out of 4 participate and the average income from the sale of each painting, $10, the fund would amount to $187 million. I don't know how far that will go with the survivors, with the pandemic people survivors. I have no idea. But I would give those funds to local charities that have lists of the people within their neighborhood, within their area, within their community or state. They know those people, and they will divide their funds and give it to them. It might be $100, it might be $1,000, it might be multiple thousand. You and I don't know. It will depend upon our generosity. Not mine, not you, but our generosity. Are we really American patriots, willing not only to back our troops in Afghanistan and Iraq and in World War II, in Germany and in Japan, but to back the population around the world that continued to grow and grow after landing in China and jumping from country to country to country, and then coming to the United States, which now, if you look at the statistics between those who have the disease and those who have died, the United States is the number one director to people that go into the funeral parlors, and the number one that have people living at home, some that will be perfect, others that might have anti-effects after, but getting over that disease. And yet I keep reading, and I'm not sure this is scientific, that it doesn't matter. They could catch that disease again. I said it was an evil bug, but I don't even think our greatest scientists know exactly how we can get rid of it forever, like we got rid of the Nazis and the Japanese. And yet now I see signs in America, people protesting, using guns, multi-million bullet shooting guns, protesting that we shouldn't protect ourselves with masks. That is Hitler all over again, dictating whatever he thinks is right, not for the people, but just for the few that will follow his words and actions, even though they are anti-Christ, anti-Moses, anti-Hinduism, anti-anything that this world has ever stood for over the centuries. I don't respect them. I think they're living in a different century. They're living in Nazi Germany. They're a bunch of fascists ready to kill the good, the caring, the people who are compassionate about one another, who are following the Pope's mission. My mission is to spread love, not hatred, not discrimination. Love, which, in other words, respect for others. If you don't think you're God's child, then maybe you don't have to follow God's rules. Maybe you think you can get away with threatening people's lives with their safety, saying, if you don't do what I do, you don't need to wear a mask. You don't need to wear anything to protect yourself. Do like I am. I'm brave. We'll see how brave when some of those, or too many of those, go down with the bug, expressing they don't have to be safe. They'd rather be sorry. Sorry, just like the other people that were bitten, spending weeks, days on a ventilator, injections, and then maybe being released, or maybe, possibly, being sent to a funeral home. I don't get it. Am I in another world? I don't think so. I think I'm talking to you, the people of America, as well as the people of the world. Understand, we have a responsibility. Yes, when you raise your hand in the military, you understand that you're going to fight to win. You're going to do everything possible to make sure you beat the enemy. I'm not asking you to raise your hand unless it's to put your face mask on or to put something else to protect you. I'm asking you to just think, maybe it might be you. Those numbers, they say they're dying, but then they hit a peak and they come down. Next thing I know, they're rising again. And if I'm correct, I heard only last night that China, which started the peak, it went down, and now they are expecting another climb to the peak. Do you want us to keep going through that kind of scenario? Not me. I want to wipe out that bug and do it once and for all. And in the meantime, I want to show my love, my respect to the families who had somebody that was affected with the disease or somebody who actually passed away. Now let me just point out, if you paid $50, $100, or $150, it's tax-free, whatever the law would allow. I don't know those figures, I'm not an accountant, but when you actually purchase the painting for the $50, the $100, $150, I'll send you a thank you note, and maybe at that time I will check with an accountant and say how much of that is written off. Is it $10 or is it $30 off the $50? And you can only pay me, if you like, 1/3 of the cost, equal payments, $15 a month over 3 months, and pay it off, or a little bit more on the $100 painting, and on the $150, $50 a month for the 3 months. And if you're not happy within the first 30 days, send it back. I'll give you your money back. I can take that chance because anybody and everybody who has looked at my painting, and it hasn't been for sale up until now, but yesterday I was in the frame shop trying to get comparison prices, and people stood around looking at the painting and said, "Who is the artist?" And the clerk behind the counter said, "That gentleman over there, he painted the painting, and that painting is in the Vatican." And those ladies said, "Oh, I belong to St. Michael's. It's a church just down the street from us. You might even see it in this video. I believe you, no matter your faith, especially if it's Catholic, and especially if it's Christian, understand the importance of the Pope. And I believe, like me, there must be millions of others who don't care what faith God is, because to me, He is the universal God. He doesn't say, I only pray for those people that are from Hungary. I only pray for the people that come from Argentina. The universal God wanted you to have a choice of faiths. So you may have chosen to be a Catholic. You may have chosen to be a Methodist, a Lutheran, a Baptist. That is God's message. I want you to be different. I want you to have choices. I want you to feel comfortable. If you want to practice Judaism, join that congregation. If you want to be an African American that feels more comfortable in a Baptist church, do it. God has given us choices in life. Different skin colors. I'm white. The man that's running this video, his skin color is a lot darker than mine. And the next person we see down the street may be yellow, may be red. God wanted us to look differently. If we all looked identically the same, all had the same color eyes, same color hair, same color skin color, how the heck are you going to pick out a spouse that you would be happy with? There was millions of them for me to choose, all with the green eyes, all to be blonde, all to look this pretty. I picked Natalie out of a million ladies and said, that's the girl that I want to marry. Fortunately, she said, that's the guy I would like to marry. So forget this business of saying, oh, I'm Jewish, I can't have a picture of the Pope of Hope, who's asking us to pray to God for love, hope, and peace. Does that separate you from somebody? If you're an American and you believe in what God says in our anthem, God bless America, land that I love, from the mountains to the prairies, and everybody included. Okay, I'm not trying to sell you the painting just to earn the $10 or $15 that we'll give away. I'm selling you a painting which made me proud to serve on the USS Iowa, knowing that it was bigger, better, and would deliver a stronger message to our enemy than any other ship on the seas from any country. Now that may sound egotistical. Earl, you're not a famous painter. I didn't say I was. I don't even think I'm a very good painter. I think this painting, nobody has criticized me and saying, Earl, that's kind of just so-so. Everyone who has seen it casually or purposefully has been more than complimentary. And I really believe if you have it in your home, not only in your living room, maybe in your dining room, but buy the little one for your children's room. Let them grow up with the message. Let them grow up with the message that we pray. We pray to God for love, hope, and peace, and explain to them what that means. Love doesn't mean you marry somebody, but you respect them and you honor them. Hope is everybody's dream, to have a wonderful life, more successful than you might have dreamed of. Be a contributor, somebody who gives to others. And what does peace mean? Is there a better word to live in peace, under God, with liberty, justice, freedom, and equality for all? That's our national anthem. I'm not teaching anything new. All of those words came from that man up above. And those words are repeated in the Old Testament 5,000 years ago, repeated again in the New Testament 2,000 years ago. And I keep both of them on my shelf in my home, and I read them alternatively, and the words are the same and have just a little twist of the meanings, but the words of significance, of the words that are teaching you how to behave properly, how to live a life of justice, of freedom and equality. They're both the same. You know what differs? Yeah, the cover might be white or black, maybe even brown. It doesn't matter. It's the cover that might be different. Mine just happens to say Holy Bible, and therefore it includes both the Old and the New Testament. And you may not believe this, ladies and gentlemen, right under my computer, right in front of my desk, I do keep the Bible, and I keep books of hymns. Why? If I'm writing a blog or whatever, I need inspiration at times to say something a little bit differently, a little bit unique, to grab your attention. There's nothing wrong in stealing God's words when it's meaningful. And as you know, I have another program, straight out of the Bible. As a matter of fact, in the New Testament, Matthew said it is the greatest and most sacred commandment within the Old Testament. And it says, number 1, you are to love God. Number 2, love your neighbor as your neighbor will love you too. Well, I think I've told you enough about what I want to do. And in order to close, I think it might be appropriate if you will allow me to try to sing what I was hoping. We have a national prayer, I just referred to that. But to the best of my knowledge, we do not have a national hymn. So let me just cheat a little bit. And after speaking quite this long, I'll try to swallow one drink and try to give it a try to remind you why I wrote what I hope will someday be our national hymn, to be sung in every house of worship throughout the world, but especially from coast to coast and shore to shore in the United States of America. Make every day Valentine's Day. Make every dream come true. Make every day Valentine's Day. And your neighbor, yes, your neighbor will love you too. And your neighbor, yes, your neighbor will love you too. God bless you all. Thank you.